Welcome to the Nature of Education podcast. My name is Cormac Noonan. I am the founder of Wolf Academy, and our mission is to integrate wellbeing solutions into schools across the globe so that young people have all of the tools, knowledge and experience they need to live happy and healthy lives in harmony with the earth. On our first episode of the podcast, I was speaking with Petra van Haren. Petra is the director of ESHA, which is the European School Heads Association. We have an amazing conversation about the importance of integrating well-being into schools, the main challenges faced by school leaders, what they can do about it, the problem with phones and technology and how we can actually use technology for good in schools, and much, much more. Hope you enjoy this podcast, and if you do, please subscribe and share with someone you know who might benefit. Thank you. Our first guest on the podcast today is Petra van Haren of ESHA. Petra, how are you doing?
Yes, I'm fine. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast and to have you as our first guest, because I think the work you're doing in ESHA is, I suppose, really in the centre of what's going on in education in the EU. So I suppose just for the listeners, would you be able to just share a bit about your own background and a bit about the work that you do in ESHA?
Yes, absolutely. Maybe first I'd like to say ESHA actually means European School Heads Association. And it's an umbrella organization in Europe that has her members in over 25 countries. And all the members are school head organizations. And my background is all about school heads, so I'm very happy in this job. Somewhere in 1985, I started as a teacher in primary education. And from there on, I've grown to be a special educational needs teacher. I've been a deputy head. I've been a school head. After that, a school board. And growing on, I was also attached to a master program of school leadership. And the past 8 years before being the director of ESHA, I was president of the National Dutch Union for School Heads in Primary and Secondary. So actually, I'm all about school heads, and it really has my passion because I believe school heads make a difference. They are the game changers in any innovation or development that you want to do in a school.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, from the discussions we've had before, we have both seen the pressures and the problems that so many school heads face. Obviously, us working in Ireland in schools, doing workshops, we've seen, you know, the amount of different roles the principals or the school heads have to do. And I suppose that seems to be the same across the EU. And if you were to break it down into what were the three of the main problems you see facing school heads, what would you think would be some of the main issues?
Well, I would say workload, and workload. You wanted to have three things.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you referred to previous discussions. We met a few years ago in Galway. There was the NAPD conference of the school heads in secondary education in Ireland. And we met and we spoke about well-being. And what I see in many places is that well-being is considered to be like a soft skill. And of course, school head is a kind of management job. So you don't talk about your own well-being. You care for the well-being of your teachers, of your students. And our discussion kind of focused on, but you need to care for the school heads, because if they need to care for somebody else, they first need to care for themselves. And I think this is something happening all over Europe, that school heads are so engaged, so passionate, caring for their teams, their teachers, the children, the parents, the students, everybody. And they tend to forget themselves. And that has sometimes terrible results in burnouts or actually the well-being, which is very hard under pressure.
Yeah, exactly. And it does seem to be an issue that's becoming more prominent today. And I suppose, what would you see has changed over the years in the role of a school head? Why is it now that all of a sudden it seems to be, well-being seems to be the top issue at the moment?
Yeah, well, first, I think never waste a good crisis. The corona crisis, which was all over the world, actually made people realize that the well-being was hugely under pressure for students, for parents, for everybody sitting at home trying to do the lessons at some way. And suddenly this topic, which was never in the picture, became important. Not at first, but during the years, because COVID actually went on a lot longer than we all thought in the beginning, especially when the schools reopened and everybody realized that young people who had been sitting at home, their well-being was far under pressure. Teachers, parents, everybody suffered from it. And suddenly we had to go back into a situation like everything was normal. That was like a trigger that well-being was important. But actually, it also showed that, you can almost say it's like a restoration on the topic was needed because there was no maintenance at all in the past before COVID. So we realized that if you don't put a lot of attention to the well-being of people, actually the first pedagogical need to have good lessons is that there is this well-being. If we don't pay attention to that, in fact, our system is losing a lot of power because nobody can learn, nobody can grow when the well-being is not in order. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and it just made me think of the analogy. It's like the soil needs to be, full of the nutrients for anything to grow, and an education system is there for the young people to grow into who they want to be and who they are meant to be. So if we don't nurture ourselves first as teachers or school heads, then how are we supposed to help the young people grow? So it's definitely something we're trying to help with, and I suppose part of the reason we're doing this podcast is to try and understand more what's going on in education from many different angles. So I suppose that being one of the main issues, just workload, and I think some people, some school heads maybe feel that well-being is just going to be another thing on top of their current workload. And is that what you've found, or how do you, I suppose, present well-being to school heads in a way that it's not going to be another thing for them to do, but it's going to actually help them? How do you, break that kind of stereotype or belief that well-being is another thing to do?
Yeah, well, I think you cannot focus it only on the school heads because I've been talking about well-being in the general sense, but we also see in the current society that emerging of new technologies, artificial intelligences, pressure on social, coming from social media, the world is moving rapidly in an unexpected way. It's disruptive in many places. And this kind of pressure is also on the youth, but also on teachers and school heads. On top of that, we have a fast-changing geopolitical situation. There's war going on in the world. There is something with politicians. There is the public sector, which is under pressure. And all this comes together in the time that we are living in. We are in times of social transition, and that gives a lot of pressure on top of everything that was there already. And then you go into a school and it's like you make a jump in time, because in many schools, the teaching, the classes, the organization is like 50 years ago. We still sit massive in rows and there is the teacher in front telling you about the subject, about what you should need to know, while the world that we are in is not about knowing facts anymore. It's not, of course, you need basic skills, but the way of teaching, focusing on knowledge, while we should focus on competencies, on skills, on actually helping the young people and the teachers and ourselves moving in this changing world, that requires a different kind of leadership. And you asked about the workload. In a way, it's a shift of workload, because if you really have the courage to go in collaboration, to share your leadership with the teachers, with the parents, with the world around you, to do this together, then you may actually decrease your workload. Because we all know working in teams, using everybody's talents, doing joint jobs together, it can help you maybe not to decrease the work itself, but the way you feel the pressure and the workload around it may change. But well, it's a little bit maybe dreaming to the future because it sounds easy. But as you know, a train that's going straight will not go to the left or to the right very easy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we need to be dreaming of the future and then start moving towards that, because as you said, it's such an old system, 50 years or even longer. It hasn't changed that much, whereas everything else around us has changed. So we have to adapt to the situation we're in the world. So yeah, I love that focus of bringing the teachers along with you on the journey, and how can you work together as a school organism together. It's not just you isolated on your own, which maybe for the last number of years as well, it's been this kind of focus, whether it's in business or schools or anything. It's all about you kind of working on your own, and it's like this single hero trying to do everything, or heroine. And it's about like, how can we work together and how can we collaborate? So I love that way of thinking, because then it just changes everything. So yeah, that's definitely something for us to think about as well. How do we foster that collaboration in the schools? And in terms of in the EU, what country would you say is maybe leading the way in terms of what we're talking about here in terms of well-being and bringing it into the schools?
Well, I think it's not so easy to say that a country is leading. What I see all over Europe is that there are big differences between schools. Depending on what a school makes important, there is a lot of attention for well-being, or there is less attention for well-being. And in general, in politics, as said, everybody after COVID said we have to take care of the well-being of our students, we have to take care of the well-being in the school. But in fact, we slid back very quickly. We had a lot of lessons learned, but I think a lot of lessons are forgotten just as quickly. And I fear that for well-being, it's the same. So some schools, some school heads, some teams really pick this up and make it important. Actually, not only as a well-being agenda, but mostly it's more about the general well-being, including the food, healthy food, including that you need to have your exercise, because well-being is not something you do sitting to get well. It is a complex setting where you work on, let's say, happiness, well-being, both physical and psychological. So I see actually in every country that the schools are different, but I think in countries where the autonomy of a school head is bigger, it's easier to move. If you are kind of stuck in a system that is more top-down, where you are told what to do, it's a little bit more difficult to actually find the freedom and take your own focus. But yeah, I see people who are really, well, in general, engaged with youth, but that are actually doing something, trying to change how they teach, how they organize their school. But it's not so easy. It's not so easy.
Yeah, it is a big undertaking, because I suppose, as you said there, it's not just another subject that we plant into the schools. It's actually the way you do everything. You don't just sit down and do your 30 minutes of well-being every day. It's how do you eat, how do you exercise, how do you think about things, what's your vision for the future. When you were speaking there, I was thinking of the 4 Doctors, which is a workshop that we would do with primary schools, but it's applicable for adults as well. And it's Dr. Happiness, Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement, and Dr. Quiet. And it's like, how can we look after ourselves and get the right sleep, get the right nutrition, get the right movement. And it's going to take a lot of thinking outside the box, because if we're sitting down for 8 hours a day, or however many hours a day, we need to think of different ways of doing things. So yeah, it's not an easy undertaking, but it is great to see people out there like yourself who are working with principals or school heads, and you're pushing this focus to look after themselves. And I think it is starting to change, and it's great to see that change. In terms of just in your own background, I suppose, what led you to kind of really want to work in this area? Like what is it you love about, school heads and working as a school head or supporting school heads? What is that thing that gets you up every morning?
Yeah, well, mostly it's the clock, but no, I think it starts when you work in education, or when you work in healthcare or whatever. When you work with people, the moment that you can make the real difference for one person, one child, there is already the start of your passion to be happy and to stay happy. When you work in education, especially teachers, you make the difference every day for children, for parents, for colleagues, and that is something huge. That also contributes to your well-being. And I think one of the things that puts it under pressure is when you feel that you cannot make the difference, not enough. That's frustrating. The reasons can be for many reasons. It can be COVID, it can be your system, it can be a lot of things. But if you want to make a difference and you cannot because of circumstances, then you feel frustrated. And I think that is a very big thing in causing pressure. So what gets me up every morning, I think when you work with school heads, it's a feeling that you can make the difference every day. When a school head actually can have his school a place where you can be yourself, where well-being is important, where students matter, where teachers matter, where everybody can feel themselves seen, then I think the work I do in ESHA, which is focusing on networking, exchanging experiences, listening to each other, comparing like, hey, what's going well here? What can be better there? That is what's actually keeping me going. Another thing that actually makes it difficult, and I want to refer to something I learned from Pasi Sahlberg. Pasi Sahlberg is a Finnish professor, not only famous in his own country, but throughout all the educational world, I would say. And he did massive research after COVID about well-being, about results of kids and how to move on. And what he found, and that was not exclusively in Europe, it was all over the world, that where we realize that we have to move forward to get it to the next level, to really put well-being at the center, politicians move backwards. He calls it bouncing back. And that's what's happening in all the systems where we try to actually get this new focus on well-being, on sustainability, on a world where you can be happy and growing. Politicians tend to go back because you need to have grip, we need results, we need scores on the testing. And those two are kind of moving away from each other. And I think one of the important jobs that ESHA can do is bringing that back together, because we also do policy recommendations. We connect to institutions like the OECD in the School Plus network. We connect to the European Commission. We work together in network with other partners. And I think this is one of the big things, how you bring together this bouncing back of politicians and this moving forward of schools and school heads to a new policy where, I want to say it, we actually create a better world.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think we can even understand the ripples that will happen as you start to help young people and they go out into the world, and then it will create a better world. And I've never really thought of that those two opposing forces. But when you really think about it, as you were saying, well-being, or that push towards well-being, is actually going to support people in their, striving for the results and stuff like that. So it is, just showing people how these things don't have to be opposing forces. They can actually, bring everything together, actually. So that's a great insight there. And I suppose just in terms of other challenges, I know you were saying workload. And I think when I was over in Croatia at the conference over there, we were hearing a lot about, shortages in teaching, not enough teachers, and then not enough funding and stuff like that. And that just seemed like some of the schools were saying that they didn't even have enough buildings like to fit the students. So like it comes down to the real practical things. And then I suppose the well-being is kind of not really thought about because they're literally like, they just don't have the buildings. So like, what's going on in the EU in terms of teacher shortages and funding?
Yeah, well, actually, there's a lot going on, but I would like to start with the attitude of politicians, but also society broad. When you speak of schools, starting with primary schools or preschools, the youngest kids, your children, my children, they go there every day. They sit 5, 6, or 7 hours in this building. And then there are some outlines how a school building should look, the quality of the air, the quality of the light, the quality of the space. And those regulations, they are so low that, well, let's say a politician itself should close his office if the air had the quality of the average classroom. So the importance that we actually invest in the place where our children are every day is so important. And then when you look at brutto national products, how much money actually goes to these sectors, it's a very little percentage, let's say 5, 6, 7%, but it's the future of your country that's raised in these buildings. Same is for the teaching profession, the school heads profession, and actually the complete public sector. For many years, a lot of politicians have been thinking on how we can actually save money, spend less. They took it from these most important public services. And in the beginning, that's the easy way of getting money. If you don't pay the salaries, if you don't raise the salaries, if you freeze them for 5, 6, or 7 years, yeah, there's a lot of money that you can actually put back on other purposes. But now we see, after some years in all kinds of European countries, this was happening. The whole public sector is actually getting to a stop, getting in trouble, and education is one of them, because people don't want to work in a sector where you're not appreciated, where you're not having your salary in line with normal developments, where people look upon you like, hey, when you choose education, is there nothing better to do in the economical world? Because the status has gone down, and the way people talk about this. And that's what I mean with whole society. Hey, big shots. Hey, politicians, your kids go to these schools. How can you allow that the people that have to raise your kids are not rewarded for what they are, for the important work that they do? And again, in COVID times, a little bit respect came back when the children stayed at home and parents of all these sectors could see in the living room what actually happens every day in a school. But yeah, I think not being appreciated for what you do when you work so hard and doing important things is also related to well-being. And if we want to change anything, society needs to realize that this is one of the most important things we have, raising kids, and they need our attention and they need investment. And it's a low price for a rich future.
Beautiful. Yeah, I could really feel what you were saying there, that lack of appreciation of teachers. You can really feel that when you go into schools and when you're speaking to teachers and school heads. And I suppose, the lack of appreciation is reflected in the lack of funding. And I think, it's mad to think that we don't put the money and the energy into the school system, because as I say to the young kids when I go in, it's like, we need you to, come up with the solutions for the future, because there's a lot going on in the world that, needs problems that need to be solved, and we don't have all the answers. So we need young people to come up with these ideas, and we need to nurture them, because they're going to be the ones, looking after the earth when we're not here. So you would think that education should be one of the most important things that we've put our energy and resources into.
Yeah, you asked for the shortages. Well, I think this is a vicious circle, because if people don't choose the profession and there are less and less school heads, there are less and less teachers, the work is the same. So the same work is getting to less people. If you are a school head and Sunday night the telephone rings, you feel the pain in your belly, because what if a teacher is ill? Do you need to send the classroom home? Do you have to find a replacement? What will the parents say? What happens to the other colleagues? So actually, it causes new stress, that causes new people who are not choosing for your profession. And I think, especially school heads, they have an important role. They can change this circle by creating a school where you want to work. And of course, salary is very important and the status. But if you enter a school and you feel, wow, this is a great place to be, both for parents, both for teachers, you can do something in actually bottom up, well, kind of change the attitude. And yes, the politicians, they have to do something about the salaries and the working conditions in general. But the role of the school head to facilitate the teacher to be this professional, to have the room, to have this autonomy in your classroom, yeah, it's, I think, one of the most important things that we have in the schools.
Yes. Yeah, because it's important to note that the politicians need to focus on education and we need to change the attitude. But as you said, there's still a lot we can do. You don't want to lose your power either. So it's like there is a lot you can do as a school head or, you know, someone working in a school to bring that energy from the bottom up and change things. And yeah, we both know when you're working on something you're passionate about, it doesn't really feel like work and you feel nearly more energized when you're doing it. So it's trying to, yeah, how can we reimagine our own school that we're in and how can we make this a place where people love to come to work and people feel a sense of community and connection and a sense of purpose, like they're making a difference. And I've been in schools where you go in and I've seen where the head teacher or the school head is, you know, very focused on the young people and their development and their well-being. And you can just see the energy of the whole school is different. Everyone is enjoying it. There's smiles. There's, you know, and maybe not everyone all the time, but, you know, the energy just feels completely different because people want to be there. The young people want to be there too. So we can do a lot as well. So it's not to get stuck in the victim. We also, you know, can change ourselves. So yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about, you know, we're seeing a lot in schools currently banning mobile phones. And I suppose just to maybe talk about that topic as well, because technology is something that's, you know, rapidly changing things. And how is that affecting schools? And what do you think about, you know, do you think it's important that we ban mobile phones or even using technology in the classroom? Does it disrupt the learning process or does it enhance it? And what's your kind of views on that?
Well, I see in several countries that this banning is actually happening in legislation or that schools take their own measures in this. And I understand when telephones disturb your lessons, when teachers are filmed, when the students are more busy with the screen than with the phone, it's not so easy to teach and to learn. But banning telephones completely also means that we don't teach them how to use it in a good way. Because it's there. Deep tech is all around us and nothing is moving faster than all the technology that's around us. So if education starts to ignore the devices, then in the short term, yes, your lessons will be more quiet and maybe, well, bouncing back, the old teaching can go on as we did it in a quiet situation where the teacher talks and the rest listens. But actually, there are pedagogies where you use the phone in learning, where you use all kinds of devices in learning. And I think it's very important that we learn the young people how to deal with it. There is a button, you can put it off. How many hours you're on social media, how you can actually learn to make it less, to control this. And that's one of the most difficult things to do. Young people like to watch TV. They like to go on social media. They like to look at their phone. When it bleeps, immediately it happens. So what can we do to not let it bleep, to learn them how you can have silent times and you put your phone away for a few hours, or during the night it's not in your bedroom. So I'm kind of critical on the regulation because it's black-white. It's either in or out. So I prefer that the legislation is that schools can decide on banning phones from certain lessons, but they should encourage that we take into the curriculum, that we take into learning our kids how to deal with things. Same for teachers. I mean, If you look at it at a debate of politicians, how many of them are looking on their phones while they actually run the country? I don't want to see that. I want politicians that are focused on the topic and actually do their job. Same for educators, same for children. But that doesn't mean that at the same time you have to learn to use this device for everything that is useful for. So yeah, I think let's make it more gray, not black and white. Be critical, ban it where necessary, but teach and learn where it's also possible.
Yeah, I love what you said there. Let's make it grey, not black and white, because I think the world tends to be very black and white at the moment. And it's just with, I suppose we're seeing short clips of things, whether it's on Instagram or other social medias, and everything can seem black and white. So we have to start seeing, yeah, there is a grey area here. I might have jumped into the, yeah, I agree with banning phones, but now I see the importance as well of actually teaching them how to use it, because when they leave school, there's going to be no bans on anything. They need to learn how to decide for themselves how to work with this technology, and it's here. It's not, we can't hide from it. So yeah, I love that. And because we do give them phones and young people and expect them to know how to use them, but they're very addictive. Like even myself, I struggled sometimes, and I know all of the neuro, whatever happens in our brains when we get the dopamine hits, and I know all of that stuff, but it still doesn't mean I'm immune. So it's like, how can we expect young people to, be able to manage these without the proper understanding and training, I suppose, because they can be used.
A lot of disinformation. Yeah, disinformation, fake news. How do you teach them how to deal with this? That not everything on social media is real if you never use this device at all in teaching and learning.
Yes, yeah, because there is plenty of power in technology to, we're having this podcast now. We wouldn't have been able to do this a number of years ago. So there is lots of power in getting good messages out there too. And it's how to build discernment, and how young people build discernment and know what's real and what's not real, and what they believe, and all of that. So yeah, it's definitely something to think into more in terms of, I suppose, how do we bring that into the schools as well. I suppose, something else I suppose I wanted to go into is just, what are the, if schools or school heads are looking at how can they, implement some of these things we're talking about in terms of well-being, or other things to, help work better with their teachers and their school community. Where do they go for these supports? Because like a school head may not know where to start. Like, how do I, bring the teachers together, and how do we all work together? So is there any, resources or anywhere you would recommend them to start if they're, if you have a school head who's like, right, I'm ready to start to change how we do things and, look after myself and try and lose some of the workload. So where would they go first?
Yeah, well, I think there's not one advice, because it depends a lot on where your school is standing, the context of your school. For example, if you have a school in a farmer's area and everybody has to bring down the CO2, or there's a major illness going on with the animals, the focus of well-being, where your kids and teachers are in this area, is very different from when your school is in a big city where you have a lot of nationalities and social backgrounds, where the ultra-right movement is growing up, and on the other side there is a left movement, a green movement against it. So depending on where your school is, the kind of well-being that's under pressure can be very different. So the starting point is, yes, you may want to find help, but first you need to understand this societal question. I think, for example, farmer or nature, it's a big dilemma. Industry, where we all live from, or nature, what comes first? So to understand these big issues, it's very important, because this is the world where everything happens in. And then if you realize that you have to do something, usually it's very difficult to find the answers, because there are programs especially focused on students, on their well-being. There are emerging more and more programs for teachers, but programs for school heads themselves, for example, they hardly exist. It's actually one of the reasons why when we started and we met each other, that we identified this as a very important topic. And the school head, especially because it's, and the word says, you're a head of a school, you're actually a little bit on a helicopter view above the parties. You need to understand society. You need to understand the dilemmas around your school. You need to understand what kind of well-being is actually under pressure in general, but specifically in your context. Then you want to find the answers for your school. Where is the answer for you? So I think this is a little bit a blank page. And I hope that especially with ESHA and maybe together with Wolf Academy, we can actually develop programs. We can develop consciousness that this is an important topic if we really want to change something.
That's a great answer. I think you've really took the bird's eye view of it all, because it's easy to think we'll just package up a wellbeing program and bring it into all of the schools and it's all the same, and it's just going to work. But it's like it has to be tailored for every school, because every school is slightly different. So different countries, different contexts, different locations. So yeah, it's a great answer. And it also makes the problem a bit wider. It's more complex or complicated, but it's definitely doable, or we can at least try help. So I look forward to seeing what we can create with ESHA and Wolf Academy in the future. And,
probably the mechanisms will be the same, but not the context.
Yeah, exactly. And just in terms of your own workload, we're talking about workload. What does your workload look like with ESHA? What's ESHA up to over the next couple of months? Is there anything interesting or exciting going on?
Yeah, well, I think there are exciting things going on every day. ESHA is very involved in European projects where we address bigger topics. And in this context, we contribute to research, we contribute to networking, and we contribute to dissemination of interesting findings. Apart from that, we organize networking. Well, I told you we're in more than 25 countries, so organized networking all over the countries, that is quite a tough job to do. And in the end, I think also here the technology helps a lot, because you cannot keep on fly all over Europe with all these people to meet each other as we did in the past, or as we may have wanted to do in the past. So technology helps us a lot to create networks, to meet very easy. We have digital cafes where people can check in. We have regular meetings online. We work on these projects online. We do interviews online. Well, everything what's possible, we try to do. And this way you also lower your footprint. So you try to actually practice what you preach. And that's not always easy, but we try to do it as best as we can. Well, we have twice a year a meeting with all the representatives of the different countries, and it can be partly or completely online. We also meet physical, because face-to-face meetings are important. If you create relation with people, face-to-face meetings like well-being, you need to touch, you need to feel, you need to smell. And that's important in relation. So you cannot do everything online. And the same is for education. The actual encounter of people is very important. But we try to do the things as effective as we can. And once in 2 years, we have a major conference. The next one will be in Rome in 2025. And there we will meet with school heads from different countries. And this is fantastic, because I see that schools actually get related to each other. They build on student exchange programs. And it's a great opportunity. Like 1.5 years ago, we asked the Wolf Academy to do a program on well-being. And that was very interesting, because a lot of school heads were like, wow, we have been waiting for this. And some school heads said, this is so high spacey, this is not my thing, it's too esoterical or whatever. So you see also the culture of leaders, the culture of schools is very different. But yeah, my workload is to connect, to network, and to actually try, to get new knowledge, to create new knowledge, to bring knowledge back, and to translate policies to the actual praxis of schools. And that's a great job to do. But yeah, the workload is a lot. But as you said, when it brings energy, you do it anyway.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, you are doing great work, and I appreciate all the work you are doing, and for having us at the conference. And I'm excited to see what other work we can do in the future. And just before we finish up, Petra, just want to ask you, if you had a magic wand, what would be one thing you would change tomorrow about education?
Well, I would like to take the pressure off that testing is a goal in itself. I think, and testing for me, it also means measuring teachers or measuring performance of people at work in education. It doesn't mean that you don't have to deliver, but when testing, when measuring becomes a goal in itself, and it's not used to actually enhance well-being of people, enhance the quality of what you're doing, then I think you go in the wrong direction. We are, in a way, going in that direction, that it's again important, tests, results, visible. So my magic dream is that we really use whatever kind of measuring only to improve our well-being, ourselves, our learning, and stop making time frames that you have to achieve exactly this when you're a 4-year-old, this when you're a 5-year-old, this when you're 8-year-old, because a dropout is only a dropout if you relate it to a certain measure. And if you can let go of this and you can actually say, hey, this is just where you are, and maybe you want to get there. Some can do it in 2 months, some can do it in 2 years. But please don't push people around with all these measures, which are a goal in itself. So my magic dream is to really go to the passion and the talents of whoever children, teachers, school heads we are.
Beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing all of your wisdom and your passion on the podcast today. And it was so lovely speaking to you. And I'm sure we probably might do another one in the future. And I suppose I'll probably see you in Brussels soon for the next conference. So thank you, Petra.
Let's try and do that. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure on my side as well.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Nature of Education podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening. And if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear from you. If you have any recommendations for guests, also please reach out. You can check out what we do at wolfacademy.ie and you can get in touch there. So thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.